Support for the Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you in part by University of Idaho, Idaho's only Carnegie R1 classified research university. Our Carnegie R1 designation recognizes the discoveries we make that help our forests thrive. It means we're creating more doctors and doing real research to strengthen cybersecurity for Idaho businesses, our energy sector, and every Idahoan. More at go.uidaho.edu/Idaho-is-Idaho.
Think you missed too much of the Idaho legislative session to catch up? Not even close. Our Legislative Roundup newsletter is following the biggest budget decisions, key debates, and everything else happening at the State House in one quick read every Monday. It's not too late to stay informed. Subscribe today at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Boise's creative economy is booming, from live music and festivals to design, film, and the visual arts. It's more than just about entertainment and culture, though. It's about jobs, businesses, and tourism. And it's what makes many people want to stay here, and it makes others want to move here. And all across the country, cities are becoming more and more strategic in how they maintain and grow a creative economy. And this idea will be the subject of the upcoming panel at the City Club of Boise. So today, joining us to talk more are Nicole Mulumby, professional flutist and BSU professor, Nathan Walker, director of outreach and education at Duck Club and Treefort Music Fest, and executive director of Music Idaho, along with Vanessa Fry, City Club board president and co-founder of the Idaho Policy Institute at Boise State University. I'd like to welcome all three of you to the program. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Gemma. Great to be back.
Thanks for having us.
Vanessa, let me start. It's so nice to have all of you here. Vanessa, let me start the conversation with you. When we hear that term, creative economy, what does it mean? What do people need to know about it?
That's a great question, Gemma. And, when we first started doing this work, we had to define that for ourselves. What does it mean to be creative? Tomorrow we'll be talking about everything from the visual arts to performing arts to music. Really, it's an industry that's not well documented in the state, and part of the work that we're doing together is actually some research on it.
So, Vanessa, why is this conversation about a creative economy, in your opinion, especially important right now for our state?
That's a really good question, too. I actually just got an email a few days ago from Chris over at Kin, and we started emailing about the importance of the creative economy and how we can make sure it's really clear to people here in Boise and across the state how much it actually contributes to the actual economy as far as dollars and cents, and also our culture. Socially, it's incredibly important. Educationally, it's important all across the state.
Mm-hmm. Nicole, let me bring you into the conversation. Can you tell us how your work plays into the city of Boise and the state's creative economy? Because, as I mentioned, you are a professor, but you're also a musician.
That's right. So my role here not only is to, educate our music ed and performance students, but also get them ready to enter the workforce. So one of the things that I'm working really a lot on right now is music on the flip side, where we're exploring career readiness and skills that prepares students for either internships or jobs post graduation. And right now we have about 32 students who are embedded deeply into Treefort Music Fest this week with the volunteer system that's been set up. And so it's a great way for our students to be involved in the community, get some job skills in sound and production, and then also, explore what's out there after graduation.
So Nathan, similar question for you. How does your work play a role in our state's creative economy? And what would you like folks to understand more about that?
Sure. I think, as ours is centered around music, and I think is using Treefort as an example, there's it's become such a spread throughout the community festival that there's so many tendrils that contribute directly to the economy, and then indirectly as well. And I think more so, kind of like what Nicole was saying, like we want to be able to provide opportunities in the sector here where people don't feel like they need to move to LA or Seattle or New York in order to have jobs in this creative economy and be able to stay in Idaho where maybe they want to stay. And additionally, like we've found, even anecdotally, we know that Treefort Music Fest and some of the year-round creative economy opportunities that exist are a source of workforce retention and
Mhm.
and just a reason that people like to be here in Boise.
Vanessa, other cities across the country have actually formalized a creative economy strategy plan. So, do you believe this is something that cities in Idaho really need to be looking at more? And if so, how could it, benefit the broader community, but also, our economy?
Yeah, there are quite a few places across the country that have really leaned into this, and really the network of people, businesses, and organizations that turn creativity, culture, and heritage into economic activity, right, and community experiences. And what this all does, as Nathan was pointing to, is it creates jobs, it supports local businesses, attracts visitors, and really makes our communities distinct places to live. So as we're thinking about how do we retain our talent, how do we grow what we have here, how do we celebrate who we are, thinking about how to do that strategically along with why people are here. And a lot of that is what we have to offer, from things like Tree Fort to our museums and all the different experiences when it comes to this part of our economy, to think about how we can collectively together articulate the return on investment in investing in our creative economy
Mhm.
will be a really important strategy for us to support who we have here today and then create a really good future for those creatives.
And Nicole, you mentioned all of the work you're doing at Boise State with students to get them ready to go out into the workforce. So, how would you say that the creative economy intersects with or needs to intersect with workforce development in a city like Boise?
Right. So again, Nathan hit it. We want to keep our students and our graduates in Idaho. And we want them to see that the creative economy is actually a place that they can find themselves in a meaningful career here in the homes and the cities that they grew up with. So many of our music
Hmm.
education students go back to rural Idaho to teach. But we also have this great network of music makers and creatives across the state. And having our students see a pathway that they can stay here in Idaho and work in the creative economy is really important.
Nathan, I have to say, it's only been maybe 2 or 3 years since I even knew this term creative economy. I was lucky enough to moderate a panel for Leadership Boise a couple of years ago, and it was around this idea of a creative economy. And, I really had to do some research in it because I was like, a creative economy? Like, what does that mean? But the
Mm-hmm.
more I learned about it, the more it made sense. And it really felt like, Boise does have such a creative personality, right? And what I mean by that is we have, there's musicians, there's art, there's museums. I mean, there's festivals. You go on and on. Well, are you still in a space, having, been with Treefort for so long, that you're still though running into folks who maybe haven't heard this terminology or who don't understand the impact of it? And if so, how do you have those conversations so that people can have a broader understanding of what creatives can bring to our community, beyond entertainment?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's still an ongoing messaging challenge is to when people think, of, especially like the arts, maybe as a broader term, you think typically they think of some larger institutions that are really like philanthropy driven, and like we keep trying to message to people that especially with the musicians and like bands or whatever, they're more like miniature small businesses, and there's
Mm.
this economic driver that they have that really, like Vanessa was talking about, really has an outsized ROI on the investment that's put in. And so we try to get people to understand that like this is worth investing in as a sector in a very real way. Like we have, partners that we've been working with that do some of this work around the region. And like, for instance, in Oregon, they've done their research that has determined that music specifically has more economic impact in the state than even professional sports. So those are some of the things that we've been working toward, and really what brought me to work together with Vanessa and Nicole, and the work we're doing is trying to better capture data that shows that message. And we've, in the last 2 years, we put out an impact report as the festival that shows some of the just doing a better job as a storytelling document of really capturing what our economic impact is for those 5 days.
Hmm.
And then some of the work we're doing broader than that is really trying to capture the impact of this sector across the state.
Nathan, can you dig into that for us a little bit more? You mentioned the economic impact of this 5-day festival known as Treefort that's been here for quite some time. That's really, in a lot of ways, put Boise on that creative map. When you
Yeah.
say long-term economic impact, what does that look like in real numbers?
Well, I can tell you because we have, through Idaho Policy Institute and Vanessa have got a better metric to gather some of this stuff. Some of the previous numbers and data collection was really just about, out of town spends and stuff. And so we feel like we've got
Hmm.
over the last couple of years, had a better grasp, but a more robust metric. And last year we've got 15.8 million in economic output just for those 5 days of the festival. And so those are real numbers that we can use to help translate our value to those willing to help support even more, or recognizing that, hey, Idaho does have a robust economy that's worthy of investment in this sector as just as much as, some of the other sectors that are statewide.
Mm. Vanessa, you mentioned Chris Komori from Ken at the top of our conversation. And, what I find interesting about his work is what he has said in the past is that for people to needing to understand that our creative economy, our artists, our creators are also the ones who also tend to work in other service related industries, right? They're also the ones maybe working in our restaurants, right? Beyond that, you have Chris Komori who created City of Good, right? So they're also making sure that that our that folks are fed, that farmers have business. The impact of creatives, would you say, goes deeper and farther than maybe the average person understands? And is there enough going on within cities to make sure that our creative community is sustained?
Yeah, Gemma, that is such a great point. I think that it's almost like a hidden part of the economy. And I think part of what you're getting to is, and this is part of the research that Nicole, Nathan, and some of our colleagues are doing together, is to look and see if and this is specific to the music industry, if you were a musician, can you make it just being a musician at Idaho, in Boise, right, in Coeur d'Alene, or
Mhm.
what other jobs might you be doing? And we have a sense, and this is anecdotal from who we've talked to across the state, but we'll be able to quantify. We have a sense that people are contributing all across the economy, right? Not just as a musician. And then as a musician or a graphic designer, they're doing work for profits too, right? So they're participating in the for-profit economy, the nonprofit economy, the service economy, all across the board with the skills that they have, and in some cases, having to supplement their income because perhaps we just aren't quite supporting those creatives as much as they need to be supported in order to be able to make a living just doing that type of work.
I have a question for all of you. And Nicole, I want to start with you. In your opinion, what does a healthy creative ecosystem look like beyond just festivals and performances?
I would say full audiences, So it's not even just that the musicians are working and creatives are working, it's that the community itself is attending. So I want to see subscriptions, sold out to the Boise Phil or Idaho Ballet and Tree Fort Music Hall full. I want to see that it's accessible to everyone, that there's places and spaces for all people to enjoy the creative economy and music in general, and to be able to attend.
And Nathan, same question for you. What does that creative ecosystem look like?
Yeah, I think ecosystem is a term we use a lot for this because it does there's an infrastructure that needs to be in place. And so we talk a lot about like a venue ladder where there's small capacity, all ages spaces where people can really start out learning and get in front of audiences and learn what that's like. And then maybe they do well and they move up to the next little venue that's 200 to 400 cap. And then we've got like 1,000 cap and on and up. So I think that infrastructure is really important. I also think that, just like probably has in common with maybe every other industry in Boise is affordable housing. And so just being able to live where you want to work and where you work is important. And then I think that, healthy people, healthy um, participants, healthy mental health all makes for a healthy ecosystem.
And Vanessa, same for you. What does that healthy creative ecosystem look like, beyond just the performances, et cetera?
I think it's when everyone in the economy looks to the local creatives to help provide that creative support, whether it be videography or graphic design. Recently Micron hired a local firm, Vision Kit, to do some video work for them. City Club of Boise, we're going through a big rebrand, and we hired Drake Cooper to work with us on that. We have the talent here, and I'd love all the radio audience to think about that when you're thinking of the type of creative you might need to integrate into your daily life, or into your work or into the public sector, maybe City of Boise or the state of Idaho. Let's look to our local creatives because we have the talent here to do just about anything.
And before I let you go, Vanessa, remind us of the upcoming panel at City Club and how people can participate.
Yes, so tomorrow, Gemma, we'll be talking more in depth about the creative economy, and we'll be at Tree Fork Music Hall. Thanks to Nathan and his colleagues for hosting us there, 11:45 a.m. to 1 p.m. And for those of you that want to attend, you can go to cityclubofboise.org and register there.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for coming in today and talking to us more about this. We've been speaking with Nicole Malomby, professional flutist and BSU professor, along with Nathan Walker. He is director of outreach and education at Duck Club and Tree Fort Music Fest and executive director of Music Idaho. And Vanessa Fry, City Club board president and co-founder of the Idaho Policy Institute at Boise State University. We've been talking about the creative economy, and as Vanessa said, they will be at Tree Fort Music Hall tomorrow for a broader panel at City Club of Boise. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. If you learned something from this episode today, share it with someone else who needs to know about it.